Hello everyone, we'll get started now. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Oshish and I will be the moderator for our Student Action for Refugee Higher Education session. This session is aimed at highlighting the power of students to make change within this field and to showcase some practical examples of what is already being done to increase access to higher education for refugees by students. Today you may hear terms such as refugees, exiled students, sanctuary scholars, and all of these terms refer to forcibly displaced peoples. We have structured the session into 3 parts for you to allow for me to allow you to hear from our panelists, engage in some discussion with them, and then come back to a larger group discussion. We will start by hearing from our 10 student representatives about how they have been able to make a difference in the lives of their peers by engaging in various different initiatives. This session will help you to understand how to support student leadership within this field, and we encourage you to reach out to our panelists to continue the conversation afterwards. Before I ask our panelists to share, I would like to speak a little bit about my experience as a student involved in this work. I am a program assistant with an organization called International Students Overcoming War, based at Wilfrid Laurier University in Canada. During my undergraduate degree, I volunteered as a student leader as part of this unique organization that brings together students from across the university to engage in humanitarian work. This initiative is supporting students affected by conflict through advocacy, peer mentoring, fundraising, and creating new pathways to higher education. Young people at this university provide the energy to drive ISO goals, and I'll refer to International Students Overcoming War as ISO. They are driven by their passion for humanitarian work and inspired by the scholarship recipients. From the moment a scholar is selected to the moment they graduate, they are supported by ISO student leaders. Each year, incoming and continuing student leaders dedicate countless hours leading the student visa application process, house hunting, furniture shopping, course registration, organizing informal events, all to ensure that the transition to university in Canada is as smooth as possible. As a student leader myself, I have been able to experience firsthand the transformative power of youth leadership. Through this program, we have been able to achieve outcomes that are not only sustainable, but scalable. Through our unique funding model, which consists of each student at our university paying $4 each semester, we have been able to sponsor 23 students at the undergraduate and graduate levels with the help of over 100 student leaders over 8 years. And now, as a program assistant, I get to lead our initiative asking the Canadian government to support youth leadership and help us to expand ISO to university campuses across Canada. We harness the power of student leadership, both with the leadership team and scholars, to provide educational opportunities for all students involved in this experience. This work that I am so passionate about is one of the examples of student leadership to increase access to higher education for youth affected by conflict. And we are looking forward to hearing more about these experiences and initiatives from our panelists today. I will welcome our panelists in three different groups to ensure that we have lots of time for our audience discussion, and we'll just get started right away. So I'd like to welcome Aisha, Siddiqui, and Sabrina for our first question, which is, what was the most challenging barrier that you faced in trying to pursue your higher education, and how have you been able to address it, either for yourself and for your peers? Aisha, let's start with you.
Thank you, Hushish. My name is Aisha Khorram. I am a humanities student at Bard College, Berlin, and the former Afghan youth representative to the United Nations. When I left Afghanistan on the verge of my graduation and migrated to Germany, it was very difficult for me to get back on track. And the most difficult thing for me was that I didn't know the language and anything about the educational system in Germany. It seemed like the scholarship opportunities, they were out of sight, and the possibility of getting back to class seemed like a distant dream. But months after searching and seeking, I eventually received a scholarship at Bard College, Berlin, where my limitations for not having the documents as a migrant was recognized, and I eventually found a way to proceed with my education, an exceptional opportunity that very few Afghan girls have today. Knowing the significance of the privilege that I had and the the responsibility that comes with it, I decided to start helping Afghan students who have been recently displaced to find the right institutions and opportunities. And I did that first on an individual level. But when I realized that as long as the reason, the root cause behind the lack of access to education exists in my country, students will keep migrating. So, and the most important thing is that those students who are leaving their homelands, some of them might get lucky to find an opportunity, and most of them might give up on their dream of pursuing higher education because of the places they are migrating to, because of the lack of access to some of the resources that are important for students to access higher education. So I actually decided to raise awareness and support for female students in Afghanistan. In the aftermath of the Taliban takeover in August 15, public universities and schools were closed for girls. Secondary schools they are still closed. And while universities have reopened and girls returned to universities, there are significant challenges that still make it impossible for girls to continue higher education. They have been segregated from their male classmates, of course, and the strict limitations, starting from their dress code to their freedom of choosing their favorite field of study, is still there. And it was issued by the government that only female professors can teach female students, while a lot of professors have fled the country and many have lost their job. It means no education for girls even in universities. So it also kind of persuaded many families not to let their daughters attend university. So while the mainstream media and social media is more focused on the issue of female students not being able to attend secondary school, the issue of women's education at universities, it kind of was left off from the media spotlight. The reality is that today, in the 21st century, it's quite unimaginable to witness or to bear that there exists a country in this world where your right to accessing education is restricted because of your gender. But even what is more shocking is that to see the silence and the lack of response on the part of international community. So in order to tackle this and in order to raise awareness, I started my advocacy effort together with the Georgian Youth Delegate to the United Nations. We have created an online platform in which we have invited female students from across the country, from 7 provinces of Afghanistan. And we have made it possible to have this closed-door discussion of female students with the Youth Envoy Office, with UNICEF board members, UNFPA office in Afghanistan, and some of the universities from the United States and Europe who were interested to provide educational opportunities for Afghan students. And the purpose of this meeting was for the students to share the concerns and also practical solutions on how to tackle the educational crisis in Afghanistan. And what we requested was the establishment of educational centers that are equipped with internet and computers for students to access online education. But most of the time, these online education centers, they are targeted in Afghanistan. But we have also suggested access to UN offices in Afghanistan for this purpose, because there are universities in Europe and in the United States who are interested to provide opportunities for students if this serious challenge of logistics and internet is resolved by the UN agencies on the ground. And we have also lobbied for the increased scholarship from the UNHCR and UN for the Afghan students. And as a result, one of the achievements of this meeting was that a number of Afghan students are now participating in online classes at the Bennington University of the United States, and they are studying for the spring semester, and they will not miss out on education, even if it might not be to the level that they can have in their universities. And the students then can transfer their credits that they receive from the Bennington University to other universities that they will continue to study. What I did was, together with other UNU delegates, wasn't enough to resolve the educational crisis in Afghanistan. But we did our part as individuals, because we cannot lose another generation of inventors, scientists, change makers, and peace builders. And we today have to question the failure and the flaws of our international system that actually caused the number of refugees to grow even larger. And we have to recognize the decades of the false and the broken promises, the double standards, and the partial injustice that are fundamental part of how we got to this situation. We owe it not to the young people in our countries, but to the young people around the world. We need to ensure in our individual, in our institutional capacities, that no one is left behind and everyone has access to education, no matter where they live. And unless we commit to that, we will be never able to find a sustainable solution to the biggest challenge that our humanity faces today, which is the crisis of migration. The important thing is that education cannot wait, because educational crisis is an emergency. And now, more than ever before, it's important that it should be treated as one. I call on the audience and everybody listening to us today to make sure that your institutions are inclusive and responsive to the educational crises for students in conflict situations. Thank you.
Thank you, Aisha. Thanks so much, Aisha, for that very powerful message. Siddiqui, let's hear from you.
Thank you very much. I'm Siddiqui Bamerineza. I'm a Congolese refugee who's living in Rwanda. I lived in Rwanda for more than 27 years. At the level that I can't even know what is happening in my country, because I grew up as knowing what is happening in Rwanda. I don't know the life in Congo because of being an exiled child at the youngest age. So in my analysis, I'm going to talk about this in an African context. So because that's where my knowledge is. So I graduated from Southern New Hampshire University through Kepler. Kepler is a university program in Rwanda, in Rwanda and Ethiopia. There is a campus in Kigali and another campus in Kiziba refugee camp, and also a new campus in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. And I did a number of fellowships, including WISE Learners Voice program by the Carter Foundation. And after my graduation, I have worked as a refugee college guidance counselor, but also when I was a student at Kepler, I also worked as a high school teacher. And then now I'm a manager of refugee student affairs. So it's a transformational journey, because I shifted from being a vulnerable student to being a leader because of education. Yeah, I remember when I was at high school, in a group of students, they should talk about the stories from home. And then when they see you outperform the others, they ask you, where are you coming from? I couldn't say, I'm coming from Kiziba refugee camp. It was a kind of thing I hid. And even many students hid that because the community was not ready to accept that kind of a student, because everyone could have kind of stigma toward that acceptance. So the first challenge refugee students face, it's kind of self-acceptance. Accepting you are a refugee in many students, and also even some teachers, because of the low level maybe of understanding the updated level of pedagogy, could even comment negatively on refugees or the ability of refugees. You see that you are not given this appreciation that can make you fly, can make you feel like you have to perform. This is the first thing refugee students face. Yeah, there are these issues of poor high school experience, especially in Africa, and also you will see a refugee camp isolated in a countryside, in mountains, where roads are not accessible, where you can say, I'm going to take the responsibility to teach these children, and then after, you can get tired of the road, and also finding the infrastructures that can help you to put them at the level you want them to be. So being in a refugee camp is a different experience, especially in a remote place. At Kepler, because Kepler is in Kiziba refugee camp too, we have brought many programs to help with that. For example, Kepler students are taught the 21st century skills, including constant learning, technology, critical thinking, so that first of all, they remove that barrier of mindset around the abilities of refugees, because they have to give it a try. And teaching these 21st century skills transform students into leaders. They can ask questions. They can even try to apply for meaningful employment. At Kepler, we've been having 90% of students getting employment in 6 months after graduation, and including refugees who are ranging around 80% in the student population, which is really good. For example, me, I've been able to move my family from Kiziba refugee camp. Now we are living in Kigali with my mother and my father and 6 siblings after giving it a try, because shifting from vulnerability to leadership, it gives me another level of thinking about the world around me. So at Kepler, I was saying, like, we have preparatory programs that Ella is leading, where Kepler teaches high school graduates how to be competent so that they can get admission at the university. This has increased the level of the number of students who can go to university, and they also shift the mindset. Another thing can highlight is the issue with women. Women get problems because more of the African families, even societies at primary age, girls get married at the early age, and they take responsibilities of taking care of children and also taking care of the husband. We've been facing issues where a woman is at school at Kepler Kiziba and a man says, come and breastfeed the kid and then go back to school, you know. And it was really harsh and tough. And then we built a women girls room where they can do that, and then the husband has to bring the child there, and then after takes the child back home. But these issues have been really affecting the women, because there are even some we went together to Kepler who said you are not able to go through this program because it's tough for me. I can move to another issue of the access to information, because we see refugee students not aware of what is happening. As I said, you will see a refugee camp in a remote place. They don't have access to internet and electricity. We faced this issue when we were also in COVID-19, where students had to go back home, and they took their computers with them, but when they reached the refugee camp, they didn't have electricity. And then other students continued to study, and they struggled a lot talking to partners. Can you help our students to have at least a place where they can plug the computers? Because of the lack of infrastructures in the camp where students can get to internet and electricity. And also, you will see high school graduates without knowledge about how to get to university, because they don't know how to browse. They don't know where the scholarship is posted. And I can point at, for example, TRISN is a response, because the Tertiary Refugee Student Network we created in 2019 is there to respond to the low level of information dissemination among refugee students, so that the students who are in the Tertiary Refugee Student Network can take the lead and take information to other students, and also help them to go through the opportunities. And also in Rwanda, we've been working on the Article 26 backpack, which is a program we are implementing with UC Davis University to help students learn about opportunities that are available. Finally, I want to close from this recommendation. Already we have 5% of refugees in tertiary education. Some of them are graduating, others are students, others are getting into the school. We will see that in the refugee life space, there are policies set when we had maybe 0.5% of refugees going to university. Those policies are not updated to accept educated refugees to work in their communities. For example, say a refugee working in the refugee camp or in the refugee communities, getting an incentive instead of getting a salary, while he went to school to learn for earning. Yes? And then there will be this idea of help them go and work outside of the camp while their communities also need their skills there. And then their policies of working with refugees, they're not updated so that they can hold that. I would recommend that education providers can discuss with the governments or partners and the stakeholders to update the policies around the employment of refugees, working with refugees, so that they can be able to use the education they get. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Siddiqui. Sorry. You addressed a lot of the complex barriers that refugees in your context face. Now we'll hear from Sabrina.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Sabrina. I am a refugee student in Mexico. I left Venezuela as a child who still does not fully understand the severity of the situations I went through. Everything was given as if I have no option, but accept that when I leave to school, I might find a lifeless body on the pavement. That I hear a woman screaming at night for help and I can't do nothing. That I hear a woman screaming at night for help and I can't do nothing. That I have to hold my mother's hand tightly in the bus because armed men have boarded us. That I have to serve fear, violence, discrimination, and the lack of quality education. But it is not. And when I think about it, I feel anger and sadness. But to move to another country was not easy either. There is the pain we feel when leaving behind our friends or family, and the legal issues that present many problems to find employment and access to good education. So when this new nation also cannot give you everything you deserve as a human being, you have to move again. This is how I arrived in Mexico, requesting refuge and recognizing the context of crisis from which I came. But I am only one refugee case among more than 19,000 that have been registered in Mexico in the past year only. There are enough of us to fill the Parque de los Príncipes twice over here in Spain, to populate Monaco almost 3 times over, and to fill the Santiago Bernabeu Stadium, and there will still be almost 10,000 left outside. I am part of a Mexican foundation called DIME that emerged as a humanitarian initiative responding to the displacement and refugee crisis that severely affects Syrian families. Through this program, we select young students with great aspiration who unfortunately had to abandon their studies to support them in their relocation to Mexico and provide them with a dignified life with the opportunity to access to higher education, taking care of their legal documentations, their travel costs, the living expenses to hold the studies in Mexico, and provide them with full scholarships that allow them to obtain their degrees through alliances with multiple universities in Mexico. However, we are currently supporting young refugees from out of the war in a program including those that are internally displaced and forced to move within Mexico. I would like you to look at us. We are supporting young refugees to overcome the obstacles they face in the country of origin and present in the host country to become leaders of change in society, to enriching the society that have received them, and developing good practice for the nation from which they left. Right now, we are 58 students. We are preparing to support 100 by 2024. However, just like steering a rowboat, we need many more hands and coordination among them to reach our goal. So take an hour and join us to reach even bigger goals. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sabrina, and thank you to our first set of panelists. You guys all shared really unique and complex challenges, and the solutions that you were able to access and create for others were really interesting to hear. And now I'll welcome you to join the audience, and I'll welcome up our next set of panelists, Greco, Daniel, Yara, and Maria. Sure. Alrighty. Okay, so the question for our next set of panelists is, how have you been able to support academic resilience and retention in higher education? Greco, we'll start with you.
Great, thanks, Ashish. So my name is Greco. I'm a refugee from Venezuela. I live in Mexico. And I'll tell you a little bit about my story and how we supported students in my community. Once I got into school and I passed my exams, I met my classmates and I got the question, "Where are you from?" a lot. And while I was trying to create relationships with them, I always got like, "Oh yeah, I'm from Venezuela. Where are you from?" "Oh, I'm just from here." So I never really got past beyond that, and I really didn't have anybody who shared my immigrant story. And I didn't realize this until I was in a class and I had a new teacher, and she just came in and she started talking in this accent which I kind of recognized. And when she said like, "Oh, any questions?" I slowly raised my hand and I was like, "Oh, where are you from?" And she replied, "Venezuela." And I didn't say anything back, but she just like noticed that my face lit up. And as if we had like a previous arrangement, we got up and we hugged mid-class. And it was just a way of saying, you know, I'm here, we both made it, you have my back. And this moment taught me, or made me realize that I didn't know anybody who shared my story. And it made me realize that my community was missing a diverse context. And in class, we were seeing diversity. And we were being taught that when we worked and learned with people from a variety of backgrounds and cultures present, that students gained a more comprehensive sense of worldview, and we had a more enriching human learning and experience. And as we were learning this, I was saying, this isn't my experience. This isn't what's happening. So in class, also, I did a podcast with a few of my classmates, and this podcast turned into a digital community, this network that we started to expand. And it started with an episode that was about studying abroad. So we just gathered a bunch of information from universities from all over the place. And these universities reached out and were like, "Oh, thanks for mentioning us in this episode. How can we contribute?" And we were like, "Oh, just giving us more information so that other students can know about this." And also testimonials from your students that have gone abroad. And what started as a podcast slowly turned into this network that became diverse, became super important for us in supporting our education and making us feel included and part of the education. What's funny about this, or what we didn't expect about this community, small network, was that after COVID regulations opened up, we started to meet up, and we started to realize that we could foster these types of things. And the thing with students is that when you say you're supporting them from a student perspective, you kind of don't want help as a student because it doesn't come from above. You know, it's like, oh, what are you going to teach me as a student? So what we realized in our program, our podcast that turned into this network, was that helping them with soft skills or teaching them things builds community and supports them rather than just, you know, come here, come to this, I don't know, action that we're doing. So this is just one way that we can foster diversity through digital communities and technology, and I'm hoping that other refugees who go into higher education are received by more diverse student bodies. And yeah, this could potentially not just make us better students, but better humans in general. Thank you.
Thank you, Greco. And I think your podcast has a really interesting name. It's called School Survival Guide. Yeah, I love that. And I think it's very inviting to students of all contexts because we're all figuring out how to survive it. Daniel, let's hear from you next.
Thank you, Ashish. So my name is Daniel Mutanda. I am part of Student Action for Refugees. I'm part of the Equal Access Activist Group. So first, I found peer support to be an important piece of ensuring that sanctuary scholars have a fulfilling experience in higher education. So at STAR, Student Action for Refugees, we have connected sanctuary scholars to make an equal access network. So the network creates channels to share knowledge, to learn from each other's experiences, and has increased the ease of signposting initiatives that are designed to support sanctuary scholars. Moreover, and particularly in my experience, I found that connecting with others who have had to overcome the same barriers as you, that sort of feeling of being understood that comes with shared experience, that is a huge morale boost as well within itself. The well-being that you get from that helps through your time at university. In the first year of my degree, I wasn't part of any student groups. I didn't know what support was what support was available beyond what I received from my university. So I studied at the University of Winchester. I was able to study psychology through a Sanctuary Award scholarship. And everything I received from there, it was almost as if I needed anything extra, I'd feel guilty to ask. But what we do now as a network is make more resources known. So since I studied at university, there's been so much more resources, so much more knowledge, so much more support available. So as a network, we make sure that people know about these initiatives. And in the process of sharing this knowledge, in the process of creating the network, in turn, us, the equal access activists, have increased in our capacity to be able to speak, to be able to have knowledge of our rights, and the skills that are involved in doing things like this, being able to speak in front of you all. That whole experience has enriched our time at university and as graduates. Second, the wider student network. So STAR, we have multiple groups across the UK. We have groups, over 45 groups across the UK. And we can see the peer support through that mobilization, bringing all these groups together, and that solidarity. So STAR groups draw the larger student body into refugee issues. They raise awareness on their campuses through various events and just speaking about these issues. They campaign for bespoke scholarship schemes that are tailored to the needs of sanctuary scholars. I think one thing we probably would have picked up from this conference, it's not enough just to throw money at people. They need to be designed, that co-produced aspect of creating scholarships. And also creating a culture of welcome. I think there was someone in a previous session that mentioned the importance of culture building at university campuses. So that's another thing that STAR groups are great at doing, creating that culture of welcome. So, of course, you can imagine how difficult it would be for a student to study for an exam while knowing they have no means to pay for the living costs in the next semester. So we call for dedicated bursaries, and dedicated bursaries that support sanctuary scholars with like living costs, with educational costs, in-kind support. So in-kind support being things like prepayment cards that give you access to university services. These are things that regular students should already have. So there's the struggles in accessing these, in a sense, may seem the same, but with sanctuary scholars, with people who are from asylum-seeking backgrounds, there is that super disadvantage. That just means that they don't have access to what they need. So lastly, as an equal access activist, support means creating belonging within our current education system, but also coming together to change the system. Remove the barriers within higher education institutions that limit sanctuary scholars' ability to thrive. So Sadiqa was talking earlier about the importance of investing. So to make those changes, we would require investment from larger stakeholders. I'll say quickly, the history of STAR is of one student having an idea to create societies in university groups across many regions. We're across the UK now, so England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland. But this idea can only happen when we have support. STAR had support from UNHCR and the British Refugee Council. So to build networks that support students, sanctuary scholars, to allow them to have that resilience in higher education, I think we should do the same. We should likewise invest in student movements. Thank you.
Thanks, Daniel. Those are really powerful examples of advocacy and peer support. Yara, let's hear from you next.
Okay, thank you, Ashish. So, hello everyone. My name is Yara Najjar. I'm co-president of the Union of Exiled Students, a non-profit organization founded and run completely by forced migrant students in France. We aim to defend the right of forced migrants to access higher education and to improve studying conditions. We do it through advocacy, transmitting information, and support services. So having lived this experience of being exiled students ourselves, we have a deep understanding of the challenges that come along with higher education. And as Daniel said, it is quite empowering when peer-to-peer support is done by also from forced migrants to forced migrants. It's quite reassuring. So I will particularly talk about 3 topics and how we have chosen to tackle them at the Union of Exiled Students in order to help students succeed in their higher education. So first, academic support. In fact, depending on their educational and social backgrounds, students do not have the same level and they're not at the same starting point. To achieve equity, it is essential to provide support, especially in the first year of entry. For example, even though students speak the host language in order to get admitted, they do not necessarily master it. The language barrier could lead to difficulties in taking notes during lectures, in participating in courses, in writing assignments, and in communicating with colleagues. I know from my own experience how challenging it can be. So in order to provide academic support and to face social isolation, we have launched a tutoring program, pairing exiled students with French students in their classes. Pairs agreed to meet at least once a week to study together at the university library, to have lunch together at the university cafeteria, and to regularly share notes. Now we are planning to reproduce this program, but this time with the option of pairing 2 exiled students, one who is a beginner and the other one more advanced in the same field. Secondly, we have tackled methodology in French education, which can be different from the one taught in their home countries. We have organized methodology courses provided by a university professor and a volunteer PhD student. In fact, we managed to sign a convention with the University of Paris, making this course a part of the professor's teaching hours. The courses were different for students of scientific and literary domains and included two main parts. One concerning academic vocabulary, abbreviations, how to contact your professor by email, or how to do oral presentations, whereas the other part was on writing dissertations for research theses or internship reports, for example. And finally, we have worked on psychosocial support. Even though this is now available in French universities, especially after COVID, we found through a survey that exiled students do not actually use it, and that is because of the language barrier. And so we have organized a program including drama therapy and art therapy sessions because they depend on nonverbal self-expression. Moreover, we've provided a support group in Arabic for Arabic speakers. We were able to provide safe space for students sharing similar experiences to express their feelings and to support each other. So these are some examples of peer-to-peer support that can be replicated anywhere, but they definitely need the backing of allies in universities and governments and other stakeholders. And this is where your role lies, in making sure that forced migrants are truly included and supported in actions affecting them. Thank you.
Thanks, Yara. Those are some really creative examples of increasing equity in higher education. Now we'll hear from Maria, but before we pass it on to you, we know that you've been engaged in advocacy on campus as a local student to raise awareness about challenges faced by refugees. And could you tell us a little bit more about your work and its outcomes?
Is it on? Thank you, Ashish. Well, my name is Maria. I am a mother of 3 wonderful daughters, and I have been a student of anthropology and human evolution at the UOC, Universitat Oberta de Catalunya, for 3 years. A few months ago, I found a message from the UNHCR on the university campus. It was an advertisement for a workshop on creative campaigning. I decided to give it a try because I really wanted to learn how to be helpful. I wanted to know the best way to make my efforts, my will, my good intentions really useful to help refugees. So despite my lack of time due to my university duties, my work at home and my responsibility as a mother, I definitely gave it a try. I started the workshop, and with each session, my enthusiasm grew due to the positive energy of the workshop coordinators. I realized that every simple act counts. I felt that you just need to believe in yourself as an agent of change. I do believe that information and knowledge are major keys to understanding, empathizing, and helping people who are being forced to move. It is information and knowledge that help us to spread the word about the problems faced by refugees and to get those who listen to us empathize with them and to break barriers. The workshop gave me the opportunity to meet people very different from each other, but with the same concerns. I formed a group with Isabel, a lawyer, Vitali, a teacher, Sara, who was graduated as in biomedics in Barcelona, and who is now running the pharmacy in a refugee camp in Lesbos, Greece. And Tony, an absolute activist who is always present wherever he is needed. Among other things, we created a website to inform about the existence of pushbacks. And in order to increase the effect we wanted to achieve, I wrote a script to record a short film that I named Keep Your Eyes Open, with the aim of raising awareness in society of this bad practice that violates the basic rights of any human being. This was our little contribution And we did it with long-term results in mind, because we believe information has the power to fight against prejudices and accentuate empathy. I truly believe that we all can be agents of change, and a change is necessary for the good of humanity. I am certainly not a teenager anymore, but being in classroom past my 50s has reinforced even more the idea that it is essential to keep higher education students in constant contact with this kind of initiatives I have just experienced, which bring you closer to activism, solidarity, and struggle for a better world. Thank you.
That's incredible. Thank you, Maria. And thank you to our second set of panelists for speaking about the power of youth-to-youth support and how you've been able to make your initiatives more responsive to the unique challenges in your context. Thank you so much. And now I'll welcome our third set of panelists. Maybe this way. All right. Welcome Peter Kings, Jean-Marie, and Zura. Great. So my final question, and the only question for our third set of panelists is, can you give us an example of how you have supported the transition to employment pathways after graduation for refugee students? Peter Kings, we'll start with you.
Thank you so much, Oshis. It's really an opportunity, once in a decade opportunity. My name is Peter Kings Ayok. I'm a Cameroonian refugee living in Nigeria, precisely Adagom Refugee Settlement. I'm the president and founder of Help the Less Privileged Association, which is an association of over 400 refugees, all Cameroonian refugees, with a focus on education, livelihood, climate change, peace building, and financial inclusion. You know, we have been talking about education, but what is actually education? Education is a process of teaching knowledge or acquiring knowledge from others. And in order to be able to provide for our basic needs as refugees, we need skills. And you know, these skills can only be acquired through education. We are talking about education being a pathway for livelihood and employment. And I'll be giving a live example of myself. Through my education, I was able to partner with or to work with CUSO International as the livelihood and VSLA field officer, where I was in charge of the entire process. And as I speak to you, during the visitation of UNHCR to the site, the project was the best project in the settlement. And also through education and through the skills I acquired as an accountant, I acquired accounting skills, bookkeeping skills, entrepreneurship skills, and also skills in business. And through these skills that I acquired, I was able to also share these skills to our fellow refugees in Adagom Refugee Settlement by facilitating entrepreneurship development training. we were talking about education as a pathway for livelihood and employment. We know livelihood is a situation whereby people can be able to provide for their basic needs. But how can this happen? It's only through education, especially for refugees. You find yourself in a new environment, a new area. What is the best thing that can ever happen to a refugee? Is a livelihood, because it will help to reinstate you and make you to feel at home, because you will be able to provide for your family, especially when it comes to your basic needs. And now talking about employment, what do we really mean by employment? When we talk about employment, we are talking about having a paid work, having access to fair work, and not just any available job, but a job that is in relation to your skills, the skills you have acquired. So, apart from that, I and my organization, Help the Less Privileged Association, we have done a lot to help to improve on the life and livelihood of our fellow refugees. We partner with CUSO International in 2020, where we train refugees in technical and vocational education and training, where we help them to acquire skills in barbing to become barbers. And as I speak to you, we have about 11 of them who are now self-reliant because they have their own shops. And recently, during the new livelihood program, some of them have to partner with CUSO International to also train others. And not just that, we have also partnered with Mediatrix. Mediatrix is also another NGO that is partnering with UNHCR and also in charge of livelihood. We have also partnered with them, and we have trained refugees in barbing. And we, as far as livelihood is concerned, we have also done a lot by creating VSLAs. Now, this VSLAs is a group of 15 to 25 people who come together, self-selected, who come together. They contribute money through buying of shares, but also they have a limit of 5 shares each. They decide on how often they want to buy shares, maybe weekly, or maybe like every after 3 days. Now they buy shares, and then they also keep something. They also keep another savings, which we call social funds. Now, whenever they save, and if they have a project, for instance, they want to go into business as a livelihood, they can always come to their various VSLAs and then take out loan that is like 3 times maximum of what they have saved. So for those who have saved up to 20,000, they have an opportunity to have access to loans of about 60,000. And through this, I tell you, if you go to the field, you will see wonders. You will see how most of our refugees have become self-reliant because they have access to this financial assistance. So I think when we talk about self-reliance for refugees, is the best thing that can ever happen to any refugees. So I think there is a process to get to this, which is to learn. Because if you don't learn, you cannot earn. Because for an employer to employ an employee, you look at the skills that the person has. For instance, an employer who wants to employ a graphic designer, you must look for someone who have the skills in graphic designing, and just like that. So let us focus on helping refugees to learn so that they can earn. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Peter Kings. Zura, let's hear from you next.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ashish. Hello, everyone. My name is Zura, and I'm originally a South Sudanese and a former refugee from Uganda. I made a decision to go back to my country late last year, and I'm currently working for World Food Program as a logistician. So when we talk about employment, I believe, like any other person, refugees have right to education and also to employment. But we have seen that even in the best of circumstances, transitioning from school to work for refugees does not have a magic switch. And for years, it has remained a major challenge. I'll use myself as a test subject. My transitioning to employment did not come with ease, as despite few organizations having tailored solutions to enable refugees to do some volunteering and internship works, in the long run, it's never sufficient, because the internships, the volunteering are always for 3 or 6 months. So after the 3 and the 6 months, how do you expect me to survive, and how do you expect me to help my family? So it's never sufficient. And the issue of employment in refugee community is still a challenge. We are still facing issues such as discrimination in terms of gender. There are poor policies, and that is the major reason I left Uganda and made a decision to go back to my country. Because sincerely, when you look at the Ugandan Act 2006, it states refugees have right to employment. But in actual sense, they are not implementing it. So I should say we are tired of like host countries having policies written in place, but in actual sense, they are not implementing. In the same line, regarding poor policies to employment, we do not have access to work permits. However much, as a student leader, there's a lot of things we have advocated for in making sure that refugees find ease in transitioning to employment. And I'm glad to say in this discussion, I'll discuss about 2 pathways that I believe, in case we work all inclusively, it can help refugees to easily transition to employment. One, that is preparing refugees to transition. Here, I mean, this is whereby refugees youths have the access to develop their own skills, knowledge, competencies, attitudes, and qualifications required by the labor market to secure, retain, and thrive for decent employment. I know a number of student leaders. This is where, to be sincere, this is where we are really working hard to do that. But we do not have really the efforts, the power to easily make refugees to easily transition to employment. On a student perspective, I'll say, there's a lot of things that we have done through probably mentoring, training students to have some computer skills, and on a humanitarian perspective, in World Food Program, we started what was called the Women in Logistics Network in South Sudan. Basically, the objective was to fight against discrimination that comes in gender perspective. Where I'm coming from, and in South Sudan, and I believe in other many countries, logistic is normally seen as men work because it contains a lot of handling and the likes. So we came up with that network, Women in Logistic Network, probably to see how the barriers that easily help refugees to transition, majorly in terms of discrimination, because she's a female, then she cannot do logistic work, which is really a no. So we started that basically to resolve the issue that comes with discriminations as refugees are thriving for job sake. The second pathway we can see is through the process of actual transitioning. This is whereby refugee graduates are able to smoothly access productive and decent work opportunities that make effective use of their skills. I will quote from what my colleague Peter Kings has said. Refugees, sometimes we are pushed beyond the edge, I should say, to accept opportunities that are not of our skills, opportunities that are really at low levels, I should say. There is need for us to work together, to come together to see how we can support refugees to probably transition into having decent opportunities. I would say there is need to include refugees in the national employment systems. I completed my undergraduate in 2016, and it was like 4 years in Uganda searching for jobs. When you're to look at most job adverts, they will tell you they need Ugandan nationals. So I end up missing the opportunity, not because I do not have the skills or the qualifications, but because they need a Ugandan. And that is an issue, it's beyond my control. Sincerely, I'm a proud South Sudanese. There's no way I'll be forced to change my nationality to being a Ugandan so that I can get a job. So this is whereby we are really asking parties to come help us in making sure that refugees can actually be transited into having smoothly to access productive jobs in regards to their skills and qualifications. I'll conclude by challenging, I understand their government officials, their humanitarian organizations here, their private sectors, their academic institutions. I would like us to break the walls that have hindered refugees for years into transitioning into employment, because as refugees, it is making it hard for us probably to convince our communities in regards to the effectiveness of education. I come from a South Sudan community, whereby, and more so it's an African community, and as Africans we believe after education, after school, there should be a job. And going particular into a South Sudan community, we have a culture that mostly doesn't support girl child education, so it becomes very hard for us to convince our communities to send their children to school, because they will always challenge you. We took you to school, and what are you bringing on the table? There is nothing. You are here surviving in the same settlement with us, in the same camp. So they would rather prefer to give the hands of their girls into marriage and get around 500 cows than probably spending in their education. There is need for us to fight these cultural barriers. It's beyond us. We need your support. For the public, for the private sectors, my colleague Peter King spoke about entrepreneurship. It's very good for us to open doors regarding that. For the host community, for the host governments, I will challenge you to revive your policies. It should not only be written, but it should be implemented. For the humanitarian organizations here, you cannot continue working for refugees when you cannot open doors for them for employment. There is need for you to open doors for them for employment. And for the academic institutions, the labor markets requires qualifications such as degrees. So there is need for you to probably ease in the process of refugees transitioning from secondary to attaining higher education, because those are the qualifications required by the labor market. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zura. And last but not least, we have Jean-Marie.
Thank you so much, Ashish. Well, this is going to be very hard ones. Everyone has already spoken those great thoughts and proposals and recommendations. It feels very hard to take the last stage in speaking about the same issue. But mine is just to concur with what everyone has said, especially my colleagues, about the fact that it feels that it's not inclusive while after education. It feels like every time we're giving people skills, but then after that, we're not giving them room for them to use their skills. In context, I'd say, for me, I'll say a little story, a bit of a little story. When I finished high school in 2015, I started doing some digital work, just training refugees, digital skills. And for me, it was very inspirational because I taught refugees who basically, they didn't understand English, but they were very carried with how I was training and the passion I was telling them about what could come after learning those skills. And gradually I got a job there. Like, I became a full-time trainer. But the amount of money I was being paid was below, you would say it is peanuts. I was being paid peanuts. But fortunately, after some time, I tried applying for another job, and this Kenyan community, because I live in Kenya, gave me the job, and to my astonishment, they paid me 5 times what I was being paid. So that tells you how much someone can invest in you when they see the value you bring. Now, in this context, what happened to me, this guy, this boss of mine now, didn't consider me as a refugee. What they considered me was what I was bringing to the table. And what was I bringing to the table? Then I'd done some digital literacy skills, I'd done some graphic design, digital marketing, social marketing. So I came into this company as a marketing officer. So they gave me the job. I stayed there for 8 months, 8 good months, getting 5 times money I was getting from my previous job. So it was very inspirational for me, but it also brought me back to the initial places. I'm just a fortunate percentage into the many refugees who finish university and they're not able to get work. So how much more can we do to do more inclusion? Because it's very unfortunate, and I think I've seen this in Kenya right now. Some of the noises we are making with regard to inclusion made it possible to have a new refugee law. So there's a new refugee law signed by the president, and it's giving access to more integration, and particularly just allowing refugees to be just like anyone. However, the practicability on that happening is what will become a problem. But the fact that Kenyans have appreciated that it's important that now refugees to start using their skills into the community is a great thing because of many reasons. We have refugees who study in Kenya for 20 years and then they take those skills some other places. I mean, it's good for refugees because you get a chance, but speaking about the many other refugees that remain in the country and they can never get a chance to use their skills, it's really ridiculous. So being able to now challenge that problem with the new law really speaks to the hope that now refugees have there. And you go there, previously I'd seen, or in my line of work, I see refugees who have degrees and have to do some manual work like selling groundnuts. And it feels very bad for me. It feels saddening, and you think, oh, are we not humans? Are we what? But it's now sort of these discussions that we start having, that we show people it's not about competition, it's not about us versus them, but rather the contribution we can bring. We have skills, we have expertise, we have all these things that can contribute to the growth of economies, to the growth of communities. So it's very imperative that these skills are used in the best places. Someone said somewhere that currently what you can do is your currency. And I think we have equipped refugees to have now skills. It's now those moments of giving them the opportunity to now work, the opportunity to make the difference. They have ideas, they have lots of things they can contribute. And the fact that we are here passionately speaking about the issues that refugees face just says how much confident we want to make our tomorrow again. It's not making America again, but it's making the human beings great again. And who are these human beings? It's refugees. I mean, we've been facing lots of problems. We've been facing all these things. It's now those chances. I mean, it really feels great when you see a change in someone. And I think, I mean, someone was telling me some other time that, would you want to continue giving someone money so that they continue begging, or would you rather show that person how to get the money to continue doing? So it's the same context with refugees. A lot of time, people want to make us feel that, okay, you need to depend on donors, you need to depend on aid, but we are starting. The right time is now, and we're saying that the skills we have, the experiences we have, it is what we want to contribute with to this world. We are not just people who will be depending on aid. So just a little bit of what I do through my advocacy. I am representing a few voices here. So one, I am a partnership lead of a refugee-led organization. In Africa, we say, or East Africa for that matter, we call it RLOs. I don't know if we have heard that name. So RLO, refugee-led organization. They are community-based organizations, but they're doing lots of great work in the community. And for some of them, they've even gone further to get very big funding that they're employing Kenyans and refugees. During COVID, whilst other organizations had closed, they still remained. They did, like my organization, fundraised funds, over $1,500. We supported Kenyans, we supported refugees, and it's the contribution they're bringing. That's just one of them. We have even other local organizations that were doing murals and bring up information on COVID awareness. There are others that are supporting women in savings group. Peter King spoke very boldly on VSLA. For those who don't understand, it's Village Savings Loans Association, and they're doing lots of great work. People are able to come together, save up money, and continue with life. Other than that, there's still more that they're doing. But what I want to say is just, I think it is the right time to do the right thing right now. And we just need to change the perception that refugees are just people who need to be given aid, who need to be depending on certain person. The dependency has to be broken. If I was supposed to say amen, that's where I would say amen. You guys say amen? No? Okay, anyway, don't worry. So for me, I'm an advocate of inclusion. I'm an advocate of people being given spaces to thrive, and it feels great. Lastly, so last year we conducted a data-driven campaign. The campaign is called The Future with Wakimbizi. Wakimbizi is Swahili for refugees. And we did, basically it's a whole research, I wouldn't go on it, but it's future-facing research that gives the hopes of refugees. We were tackling education, inclusive economy, mobility constraints, and we have lots of that data. You can check it out on our website. And further to that, to help in the after high school, with the graphic design skills I have and connection with different people, right now, actually met Sabrina, who told me she also does graphic design. I was like, this is great. If I get some other gigs that I need some graphic work, I'll be pushing that to her. So there's quite a lot we could do, referring. There's showing people the right places to go for opportunities. So I think there's a lot we could do. We could stay here, speak about this, but it's just those action. We need to create moments of action to resolving the issues with refugee self-reliance. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jean-Marie. And thank you to all of our panelists today for sharing their experiences and the various initiatives that they're taking and supporting youth with. So we actually planned to have a discussion breakout session now, but it looks like we're running out of time. So what I'll do is I'll just invite up the panelists. If everybody could just join me on stage, you'll just have to sort of stand. And then we'll open it up to a couple of questions and comments from the audience. Adrian has one already. All right.
Yeah, I'll take them.
Okay, let me push this way. You push this.
You can sit.
Questions, comments?
Thank you very much. Yes, I have a question for you, and I'm very happy to see you now there in the front and us asking the questions. So, you've seen this conference, and maybe some of you have been to other conference, refugee conference, and it's always us asking, and yes, and the refugees, and yes, the refugees, and yes, they're very inspiring, and yes, they're very resilient, and blah, and we put your faces, and we talk about you, and we put you attributes and qualities, and I never heard, oh, refugees are also very, like bad things. We just positive things, and we just create a narrative about you, and we talk for you, and we say everything for you, and we ask money on behalf of you, and we spend the money, etc. And a great majority of, or a great number of people here, we have a job because of you. My salary, I have a salary because of you. And I'm in this beautiful city of Barcelona because of you. And next month I'm going to Paris because of you. And then I'm going to Geneva because of you. And my telephone is because of you. So how is that correct? Is that working well? Are you okay with this narrative we are portraying about you? Do you like these pictures? Do you like my salary? Do you like all this world, all these things we're building around yourselves? And thank you. And thank you for paying my salary.
Who would like to...
Maybe we get one or two more questions, and then
Sure.
we get... Is that
Sounds
okay?
good. Was that directed at anyone specific, Adrian? Was that for anyone specifically? Okay. Great question.
Okay, quickly I'm going to just say thank you for your wonderful stories. I have a very short question. I'm a representative of the National Student Union, and we are having troubles reaching actually people in need, so displaced students and academic staff. So maybe if you could give some advice how to reach them better, so we can actually work with them more than we currently do. That will be my question.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Down here.
I'll bring it.
Yes, earlier on the talk, we had the idea of self-acceptance on the fact of being a refugee and trying to study and trying to get involved in higher education context. So I don't actually remember quite good who brought that concept, but I would like your ideas, any of you, about this term, because I think I find it quite interesting, the fact that you gotta try to fight two battles at the same time. One, the fact that you're a refugee, you're outside of your country, out of your zone of comfort. And two, that you're trying to get good grades, make friends, have a good time at university or whatever college you're in. So this idea of self-acceptance of students on the facts of them being refugees, I'd like your thoughts on it if possible. And thank you for your beautiful stories.
Thank you.
So whoever wants to.
Does anybody want to answer the first question first? Adrian's question?
Well, let me answer that. I think, honestly, it's actually a good observation you've made. And so many refugees, think that way, think you are there because of us. But the biggest problem has been many INGOs and development actors shy away from being told the truth. So when you tell them the truth and you tell them in a certain way, next year you'll not find me here because you're putting us in a bad picture. So you find that so many refugees then have then closed to always play positive, always play that this is okay, that we are trying to do enough, and those kind of things. So it remains to become a problem, which in the community is vice versa. People think that way, people feel that way. Why am I saying this? It's because, for example, in Nairobi or in Kenya, you'd be aware that there are so many refugee-led organizations. Of course, for some reason, some are new and coming to existence because of opportunities of getting funding and some of these things. But you look at the kind of support even other organizations were told a long time ago, 5 years ago, about supporting refugee-led organizations. They weren't in anywhere near to having that idea. They felt that it was a competition, that someone was coming to draw me away from my job, someone was coming to put me out there, but really not the case. So what most of them are saying, they just want a table to be part of decisions, to be able to give genuine feedback that something is wrong and this is how we can change it. So I think it's a perception that might not be entirely 90% correct, but a bit of some of people think that way, and that further makes them not be able to express why they would need. But what I would insist, and in something that I think I say it somewhere else, is just that willingness for togetherness in cooperation and coordination, that there's things that we face as refugees and we know them best than any other person. We respond to those things daily. And so it's not right to come with something and not include those people from the first time, from the word go. Whether it's programming a certain project or something, you can't do that. If I had time, I'll give you an example of difference in priority. Some people came up with an initiative for giving mosquito nets in the camp, and the next day they were being used as nets for goalpost. So clearly, a disconnect in terms of the priorities and the willingness to accept feedback and giving space for the same. Thanks.
Oh, well, first of all, I'm glad that you have recognized this fact because it exists and we all notice that, but we rarely talk about it. It's been since, forever that refugees, especially when it comes to young people and children, they are victimized and they are subjectified. And we are always talking as if we are representing their voices. As a refugee, I cannot represent 82.4 million refugees today and their voices. But what we are here today, and the fact that you mentioned it means that you have recognized it. So this is the first step towards ending this process of victimization and subjectification. So what we are here for is, by sharing our stories, is to tell that you don't need to speak for refugees. Because today they are capable of demonstrating their competencies, they are part of the societies, they are striving to make change in their host communities. And that's what we are here to tell you, that give them the agency that they deserve. And I'm glad that you've recognized it, and this could be the first step towards, making the real change. So.
Maybe.
So again, the same question. Thank you for the question or your comment. And as Aisha said, thank you for recognizing that. I think that that's what you need to do, basically. people who work in this field, that they just need to recognize this. And the thing is that we need allies. We cannot do all of this work by ourselves, especially when arriving in our host societies. So we do need allies. We do need people who have professional or personal networks, and who can do this kind of job. But the important thing is just to recognize your part, and also the affected population's part, and to truly include them, and to always consult them. And for example, talking about these pictures, I think that everyone working in an organization representing or working on refugees' rights, they can simply have refugees with them all the time. Ask them even on the simplest communication campaigns, for example. Are you happy with these pictures? Does this phrase on Instagram represent you? Is it okay for you? That's basically, I think that would be great.
I'm just going to add the smallest comment because we're running out of time. You touched a point which I think is very crucial. You said you spoke on behalf of us. And I think it's very important to include us in these spaces, because we're not supposed to be integrated after these alliances are made, after we speak with stakeholders. We're supposed to be included from the start. So the design of policies that trickle down into when we go and ask for admission for a university, and our papers aren't enough, our documentation isn't enough. The strategies that support those types of regulations, those types of rules, have to be designed with us in mind from the start. So I guess it's important to recognize us, not speak on behalf of us, but include us from the design stage. So, yeah.
We're going to have Zura answer the first question, and then we're going to move on to the second question.
I'll conclude on the first question. Thank you, Mr. for recognizing us. I think this is more of saying, showing that refugees are not only beneficiaries, but also there are a lot of things that they can bring in the table. In several scenarios, we have seen, if at all we are raising our voices, people think that we need favor, but it's not the favor that we need, but it's our right that we are advocating for. So thank you so much for recognizing us.
Yeah, going to the second question, about how to reach us. You're leading the student authority, I don't remember, initiative connected to students. I'm one of the global leaders of the Tertiary Refugee Student Network. I'm Siddiqui, and there is Ella there in the back. We are in the, she's there. We are in the leaders of the network, and we are happy to connect with other networks so that we can share best practices, and also we can share opportunities. Our email is trsn.m4@gmail.com, and we have a Twitter account and IG and Facebook, and also we can also provide our personal credentials so that it can be easy to reach us. We can connect after this. And then for the third question, I'm the one who talked about the other self-acceptance thing. When I was reading a classic book written by Carol Dweck, which is called Mindset, I landed to a page where it was written, the effects of mindsets, that a negative mindset gives you a label. After getting into troubles of failure, it labels that. You think, I'm a failure, I can't do that. In my family, we've been refugees, and then I will also beget refugees. I will continue to be a refugee. That is an effect of the fixed mindset. Because beyond being a refugee is a status, but all we are in humanity. Like, we are human beings. We have brains as others. We don't have a low number of neurons in our brains. We are humans and we can change things. The problem is the status only. It's a name they give us, but we can even learn from many countries built by refugees. They are leading countries because these people have passed through challenges, and the challenges made them stronger. So when I learn about my status, it's a fuel in my engine of motivation and working hard, because I know where others are on 10, I start from -10. So I work hard. For others to accept me, they can't accept my name, where I'm coming from, how I look, but they can accept my actions because they speak louder. That's why we can't say being labeled a refugee, for example, to me, it means nothing. It gives me a fuel of energy to work harder. For those fellow refugees who can feel hurt, I'm sorry, but it's a motivation on the other side. What I've been doing on my side, I say it openly even to people who work together, to the students, and when I'm with refugee students in counseling, I tell them, accept it so that you face it. And then work hard because you are a refugee, you have too much to do. So for me, it's okay, and what I want to do, to have is that kind of, for example, being a refugee in my life, it's part of the story, not the story itself. So it means that I'm not a refugee as I am a human being who is a refugee. It's a story that's in my life. So that's why it doesn't affect us, and we encourage leaders, university leaders, policymakers, use inclusive words, inclusive terms, and also use inclusive methodology so that we can feel welcome. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you to our audience for those amazing questions, and thank you to our panelists for such rich answers. It looks like we're out of time, and we're going a little bit over time. Our panelists, we do have more panelists that want to respond to the questions, but I know we're out of time. So I'd encourage you to reach out to our panelists, either get their contact information or stay back if you have some time, so that we could talk a little bit more and continue the conversation. But thank you so much for everybody who came out today and heard our experiences and our stories. And have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you.